Hey everyone, welcome to Advocacy Answered. My name is Mike Kondratik. Today we're going to tackle part two of our conversation on advocacy metrics. And so if you remember in part one, we talked about the standard metrics that apply to the organizing framework of recruit, educate, mobilize, right? And almost all of those metrics are important to the assessing the overall quality of our program and the progress that we're making toward our goals, right? But the critical thing that they don't include is really any way to assess relationship building progress, right? And we need to be able to assess relationship building process both between organizational staff and advocates, and just as importantly, between advocates and legislators, right? So today in part two, we're going to talk about the metrics that we need to add into the mix to assess both of these critical relationship building processes. Okay, now before we get started, the one thing I want to emphasize is that being able to assess relationships means that by definition you have to add some qualitative measures into your mix, right? And again, to me, that's exactly what you should be doing. I think the combination of a subjective assessment of qualitative metrics and combining that with both some of the quantitative metrics that we discussed in episode one of this series, as well as some of the measurements that I'm going to talk about here in this episode, leads to a better overall result, right? More comprehensive measurements that give you a much better ability to assess the quality of relationships that you're building and therefore the overall effectiveness of your program. Okay, so with that, let's dive into metrics for assessing relationships between staff and advocates. And so, number one, I think you need to look at the volume and the quality of communications that occur between staff and advocates that don't go through your CRM, right? So, communications that are not being sent en masse, right? So, or another way to view it, the personal communications that happen, a personal email, a personal text, a personal phone call, right? One on one, right? Those are critical to building trust and gaining the attention of advocates. And over time, who initiates these communications is also important, right? So in the beginning, when staff are using their data to identify people who might be interested in building stronger relationships, of course, they're going to initiate almost all of these personal communications. But over time, that could certainly be different, right? As advocates become more comfortable, they begin initiating more of those communications with staff members. And certainly, even though these communications aren't being sent through your CRM, recording them in your CRM is important, right? So, as the number and the quality of these personal communications increase, it's a good sign that your advocate relationship building efforts are going in the right direction. Okay, number two, survey information. So, most organizations do a regular survey. I would typically do one on an annual basis. And in that survey, you're going to ask questions like, how much of your time each month are you willing to dedicate to volunteering for the advocacy program? What types of activities are you interested in completing? Maybe you ask a straightforward question of what are you interested in assuming an advocacy leadership role? And then, of course, usually the catch-all at the very end of the survey is what feedback do you have on our program? Just generally let us know your thoughts, right? It's where people can write long form responses. So assessing all of this quantitative and qualitative information is important. And just as important is seeing how it changes over time. So over time, most specifically, are people willing to dedicate more time and effort to the program? If they are, again, a good sign that things are headed in the right direction. And finally, a big thing for me is, are advocates willing to, and are they actually executing like word of mouth recruitment? Are they willing to tell friends and family about your program? In the social media focused world that we live in, those personal testimonials are so incredibly important, right? So people going out and giving their positive testimonial about their experience with your program, I think says a lot about your relationship building efforts. Okay, so this sets a good starting point for your advocate relationship building efforts. Okay, so let's transition now into part two. And so this is advocate relationship building with legislators. And ultimately, what we're looking for here is how many advocates are engaging in communications through more meaningful, impactful channels, right? These are channels that cater to storytelling. And frankly, they're channels that most organizations simply don't make the effort to use, right? So you want to be looking at things like how many advocates are doing face-to-face meetings, both with legislators and with the legislator staff. Both are important. Okay. When the legislator is back home, they do a community event, they do a town hall. Are advocates out there participating in those kinds of events? If they are they making the effort to get maybe 5 minutes before or after the event to have a more personal interaction with that legislator? A personal favorite of mine, writing and mailing personal letters, right? Legislators get so little mail at this point that the mail they do get stands out, right? So the first piece of critical information here is how many advocates through these more personal forms of communication might the legislator have a stronger connection to, right? And then just as important, what feedback do these advocates get from the legislators and their staff as a result of the engagement, right? This information helps you get a more complete view of the legislator relationship building process. And it helps you create what I think is important, a relationship score, right? You do need to be able to process this qualitative information and kind of boil it down to a quantitative assessment. And so this scale that I have here on this slide obviously is just a sample. You may find another scale, another 1 to 5 scale maybe, more adequately describes the relationship building process. If so, please, by all means, use that. But having this little shorthand in your database to quickly see where you stand and what work needs to be done, or if you're at a 5, the relationship that needs to be maintained, I think is important. And so the thought that I want to leave you with here is how incredibly important it is to introduce qualitative measurements into your metrics mix. And yes, it introduces an element of subjectivity. None of these measurements that include a qualitative assessment are going to be perfect. It's going to require trial and error over time to arrive at the best overall framework to assess your relationship strength, okay? But ultimately, assessing your progress at building these relationships is I think the single most important thing you can know about how your program is performing, because having a strong relationship with legislators, I think, is the single biggest indicator of your ability to change minds and move people toward the positions you need them to hold on your issues. So with that, let me know what you think. Certainly, if you think I missed an important measurement or something else should be added into the mix, I'd love to continue the conversation. You can find me on Twitter at Advocacy Answer, no ED on that Twitter handle, or shoot me an email, advocacyanswered@gmail.com. As always, thank you so much for your time and your attention.